Hi, my name is Gabriel, and I like video games, and I do have some playlists of World of Warcraft. And I'm also a writer, and one of my friends told me that they liked hearing me read my stuff, and that I should make a YouTube channel so they can, when they're high, they can listen to me talk 'cause it's so peaceful. So I'm gonna read a chapter from my new book, The Rise of Stella. You can check it out on Amazon. I'll put a link in the comments below. Oh gosh, I don't know how to do this. Holy moly, I cannot. Rise of Stella, 80 tier. Apparently, I'm struggling. So we're gonna start with chapter 1, or the prologue, I should say. The air was still, apart from the occasional breeze whistling through the nearby trees. The tension was as thick as the heavy plate armor the soldiers wore. The sun beamed down upon those gathered, the light reflecting off their plate. Men and women stood in horizontal lines, wielding long poles with sharp metal at both tips. One end rested on the grass and the other pointed skyward. It was crafted in the shape of a crescent moon that could easily slice flesh. It was an intimidating display. A dark purple fog slowly rolled into the meadow from the opposing tree line. The soldiers shifted uneasily. "Do not waver," the deep voice ordered. The owner of the voice sat atop a white horse in front of them. He and his horse wore shining gold armor indicating his rank. A long sword was sheathed at his side, and a long yellow cape draped his back. He was a general and their king, a gifted follower of Raylin, the sun god. He nudged to the horse and walked parallel to the soldiers. A warm light radiated from him, as if the sun shined on him differently. "Fight for your queen, fight for your homes, and fight for your god," he shouted. The soldiers cheered in agreement. The purple fog continued to move towards the troops. It swallowed everything it encountered, hiding it from view. It moved skyward and stretched over the meadow. A sense of despair descended upon those gathered. The general's horse grew uncomfortable and started bobbing his head, a sign of the imminent danger. Distant, unnatural shrieks filled the air. It sent a shiver down the spines of the shoulders. The shrieks suddenly stopped, which was more unsettling than the sounds themselves. Visibility lessened further, and the general had to squint to see his horse's head. A scream of pain interrupted the silence from the left side of the force. He moved to that direction, and another scream rang out from the opposite side. His horse fought against his steering as it tried to retreat. Cries sounded from all sides, accompanied by heavy breathing and horrid shrieking. "Stand to get!" A hulking shadow slammed into his horse hard, knocking both horse and rider to the ground. The horse cried out with fear as he struggled to his four legs. He turned and ran back into the trees. The general laid on his back, looking at the fog dancing above him. He felt dazed. He forced his body upright and shook his head violently. Muffled cries and clinking metal returned to his ringing ears as he left his disorientating state. He rose to his feet and drew his sword with clenched teeth. Heavy breathing came from behind. He whirled to greet it with his sword, but it vanished. "Fear," a deep voice whispered in his ear. He turned on it and brought his sword down, slicing air. The voice laughed. "You reek of it." The general spun wildly with his sword extended, hoping to strike, but it did not. He sensed something move behind him. He stood still, but brought his sword to his side. He gripped the hilt so tightly his knuckles whitened. He clenched his jaw and with all his might forced the sword back. It struck, emitting a sound of metal on metal and then a grunt. He grinned with satisfaction and turned to his victim. "You cannot beat the shadows," the voice whispered again. It came from all sides. The fog around him dissipated enough to allow short-range visibility. Tears pooled in his eyes as he withdrew his bloodied sword from the victim of his blow, who was one of his own soldiers. The soldier released soft gasps and moans of pain and surprise. The general dropped his sword and caught the falling soldier. They fell to their knees. "I am sorry," the general whispered in the fallen soldier's ear. The soldier's body went limp in his arms as he exhaled his last breath. "I am so sorry," the general cried. He laid the fallen soldier gently to the ground and stared at his lifeless body. Tears rolled down his cheeks as taunting laughter echoed around him. He threw his head back and released a yell of rage and sorrow. A roar of footsteps and heavy breathing charged at the general. He extended his arms outward, prepared for death. He closed his eyes as the shadow figures pounced at him. He felt the warm, foul-smelling breath from all sides. In that instant, he heard a voice in his mind. "Rise," it commanded. A pillar of sunlight slammed into him from the sky, piercing the purple fog. The shadowy apparitions, inches from his head, cried out as they were incinerated in the light. The light rained down on him and forced his eyes open. Their usual color of yellow was morphed into an intense gold that leaked into the air. He grabbed his sword and rose to his feet. The pillar retreated to the heavens, but golden light continued to dance around him and his sword, which was no longer bloodied. "General!" an older voice cried out. It was his second in command, a short distance away on his knees. "John!" the general exclaimed, kneeling at his side. John held himself with one hand on the ground and the other on the wound, where his plate armor was ripped open. He exhaled painfully as blood dripped from his mouth. The general closed his eyes and positioned his head over John's wound. The light around him was absorbed into the gash. The leaking blood returned to John, and the wound closed. John released soft moans of relief as he removed his hand. He rose with the help of the general with an expression of awe. "Are we all that remain, John?" the general asked, scanning the surroundings. "I sent a soldier back into the tree lines when we were attacked, Paul," John snapped. A short, trembling youth emerged from the trees. "He's just a boy," John continued, justifying his actions. The general nodded. "Make haste back to the citadel and tell the queen what happened here. Tell them to seal the gates." He paused, looked around the eerily quiet meadow. "Tell them we have failed." Loud shrieks burst out in the distance. "Find my horse! He ran into the woods," the general said quickly. Another shriek rang out and the purple fog moved back in. "Go, now!" The boy ran back into the trees with panic. "Stand with me?" the general asked, putting a hand on John's shoulder. John smiled. "Always, my friend." So that was the prologue. If you liked it or want to see more or read it yourself, I have it on Amazon. And again, I'll put a link down in the comments below. And in the next video, we will tackle chapter 1. Thanks for watching.